professions, most important Refractive Surgery Society, the ISRS, and the AAO, and to be recognized by my peers and colleagues, so thank you very much. So these are my financial interests, which are not relevant to today's talk. I'm going to be talking a little bit, I first want to recognize, some of the previous recipients of this award, and also to recognize a few individuals who have had a big impact on my professional career, and also some of the people on this list that have been great colleagues. Also, just a little bit about myself. I'm from Minnesota, grew up in Minneapolis and attended University of Minnesota, where I was an undergraduate in geoengineering and geophysics until I realized I needed to go into medicine. And had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Richard Lindstrom when he was still on faculty at the University of Minnesota, and got to see my first phacoemulsification with him. While in residency, I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Roger Steinert, who was my cataract teacher and refractive teacher. And during chief residency, I had the pleasure of training Dr. Sonia Yu, who became faculty with us and moved on to Miami, where she served as a wonderful role model. And then co-fellows, John Camelopoulos, Juan Carlos Abad, and Joshua Young, who worked with me during my time while John Talamo was service director, who had done early work in MMC with PRK, and then finally with Dr. Azar's arrival to Mass Eye as service director in 1996, bringing with him his energy and curiosity, and also a slew of research fellows, including Damien Gatinal, Sufi Tanari, and Robert Baum. So in 2009, I actually was approached by a postdoc, Giuliano Scarselli, who was working in Andy Yoon's lab at the Wellness Center of Photomedicine at Mass General, and to basically discuss a new optical method for evaluating corneal stiffness in its clinical applications. And so that's what I'm going to be talking today, a little bit about optical imaging technologies for evaluating corneal biomechanics and lens elasticity. We all know the cornea contains about 200 to 500 sheet-like layers made up of well-organized collagen, fibrils, and extracellular matrix, and that biomechanically the cornea is highly anisotropic and non-linear. So we've all come to appreciate the clinical significance of measuring corneal biomechanics as early screening for diagnostics and keratoconus, trying to improve surgical outcomes either with collagen cross-linking or laser vision correction, as well as improving tonometry precision and monitoring progression of glaucoma and other areas of eye health, such as trabecular meshwork, crystalline lens, and sclera. Well, conventional biomechanical tools really are invasive and lack the resolution for in vitro measurements. We do have some other existing clinical devices like Corvus ST and Aura, which use air puff and high frame camera measures to measure corneal deformation. But these methods in general tend to measure just overall corneal stiffness and really lack spatial resolution. And moreover, there's complicated modeling that's required to quantitatively obtain elastic moduli, which might be indirect or based on hypothetical assumptions. And these devices work, they do have been variable results with them. Brion microscopy, it's basically an in vivo non-contact technique capable of recording and imaging the elastic modulus of the cornea and lens, and basically uses a light energy to measure reverberations through transparent tissue. And then software basically performs spectral analysis of scattered light to determine tissue biomechanics, and no corneal deformation is required with this. More specifically, Brion scattering is a form of quantum measurement of frequency shift in energy, and this shift is what's been known as the Brion shift. It is a particular property of the molecules that are being studied, and it's been studied for over 40 years. We measure it with spectroscopy, and this is proportional to the longitudinal modulus of elasticity, and you can measure elasticity and viscosity with this. But there are a lot of challenges with this device because there is very low signal, 1 billion photons of laser lights needed for 1 photon of backscattered Brion. You need spectral resolution as well as spectral extinction, which makes using this information difficult. This is the device. It was a lab bench optical lab bench that was set up, basically using a confocal scanning system and eye tracking system, which allowed for pupil detection as well as depth through optical triangulation. And these are the images that you can obtain with Brion microscopy. These are some of the early images. And you can see the correlation here to the tissue, comparing it to H&E and second harmonic imaging. Here, once you do a kind of a central depth profile, you can get a slope in the anterior portion of the cornea and the posterior portion of the cornea, and calculate something called the mean modulus, which is very useful, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. Again, what are the possible uses for Brion optical microscopy? Is basically detection of subtle differences in the biomechanical properties of the cornea. I'm not sure we're quite there yet, but this is to understand abnormal pathology. We have to understand normal pathology, and these are just images of normal patients. You can see there's positive correlation with distance from the center of the cornea to the periphery, as well as thickness, and a negative correlation with corneal steepness. So this is a depth elasticity profile, basically showing the difference between central and peripheral measurements with Brion microscopy, seeing that the central cornea is less stiff than the periphery. And also with Brion microscopy, one can look at age-dependent changes. So you can see there's actually an increase in elastic modulus with age. So what about the early diagnosis of keratoconus? This is probably one of the areas that have the biggest questions. Brion microscopy can certainly distinguish a normal cornea from a very advanced keratoconus with changes in both slope and modulus. This is a specimen from an adult specimen from a keratoconus patient I did surgery on. And you can see here the difference in the Brion microscopy. Here, the normal eye, and here, the keratoconus eye. And it looks very similar to the one I just showed you a little bit earlier. But what's very interesting about this technology is you can do regional mapping with it. And whether I'm in the center of the cone or move just a little bit outside the cone, I can generate different curves, and this is the periphery, all of the same cornea. And from that information, we can actually create stiffness maps or elasticity maps to help us understand the corneal biomechanics. This is just some Brion maps for normal, mild, and advanced keratoconus. And you can see here in the stage 4 keratoconic patients, we can easily distinguish normal from keratoconus with the Brion measurements. However, when we get to more milder cases of keratoconus, there is not enough statistical significance to tell a difference. So we, not myself, a different group came up with the idea of basically looking at 200 patients with normal and keratoconic patients to look at a longitudinal modulus. Here in the normal corneas, you can see there's a slight increase in Brion microscopy with age, but really no significant difference between eyes, left and right eye, and a very slight difference in the absolute Brion shift shown here for normal eyes. These are just some of the represented eyes from normal, mild, and advanced cases. And again, from these advanced cases, based on keratoconus staging, you can see that there is a difference in the Brion shift for the more advanced cases, but not for the less advanced cases. However, if we do spatial variation of the Brion frequency across the cornea, comparing central to periphery, when we look at the final measurements here, we can really start to see statistical differences in the more milder cases. And another way to look at that is through bilateral asymmetry, comparing the left and right eyes with the absolute difference. And here, when we look at the thinnest point in the cornea, we actually get very statistically significant differences compared to normal. We can also use this to evaluate cross-linking treatment in both distribution and magnitude. Here you can see a non-cross-linked cornea and a cross-linked cornea, and you can see that the black line here represents the cross-linked cornea with an increased slope and increased Brion measurement indicating increased stiffness. We can look at off techniques as shown here, and you can see in the anterior cornea you have more cross-linking or more stiffening, I should say, and then also in the central part, and then in the posterior part there is not. If we look at epi-on technique, and there's many comments I've had in the past about this, there's been changes, but in general, when we performed this, we were able to show some cross-linking, but not as much as with the epi-off technique. But this may be a device that can evaluate that in the future. Likewise, what about accelerated cross-linking? Here we can, this is a study that Dr. Scarcelli did after he left and went to Maryland, but you can see the differences between 3 milliwatts, 9 milliwatts, and the higher treatments with much less effectiveness, and again, comparing anterior and central corneal cross-linking within this, anterior and central corneas with the cross-linking. What about its use for biomechanical changes after laser vision correction? We have been able to show differences in Brion shift for post-myopic LASIK patients with moderate amounts of change, and less change actually when patients undergo PRK. More research needs to be done in this area. We've also been looking at the use of Brion microscopy for looking at maybe dysfunctional lens syndrome and formation of cataracts. But the Brion microscopy can actually be used to look at the lens. These are studies that were done in a mouse mirroring model in vivo. And what you can see is that over time, as the mice get older, of course, lens gets stiffer. This can be easily measured with Brion microscopy. And this is the human in vivo data. You can get an inverse parabolic curve as you move from anterior to posterior. The lens and move through the nucleus. The lens becomes stiffer. You can measure that, and you can see the difference in the plateau. The maximum is about the same, but the plateau gets wider as we get older. And in this case, we showed about a 14% increase in total stiffness between a 23-year-old and a 45-year-old. Other changes have occurred in terms of improving Brion microscopy, including some pulsed simulated Brion microscopy, which speeds up acquisition of data, which has been one of the limitations with the device. Other groups have established motion tracking Brion microscopy, which also has accelerated data acquisition. It's also been recently commercialized through Intelon Optics as the BOSS, or Brion Optical Scanner System, and several international groups are using this. And I think we're going to see a lot more data published on Brion microscopy in the future. What's on the horizon? Well, our group has been looking at corneal biomechanics using optical coherence elastography. This is a recent picture with Dr. Yoon and I, and the postdoc working with Xu Fang. So, as I mentioned before, optical imaging techniques for measuring in vivo measurements for biomechanics include Brion microscopy and optical coherence tomography. In Brion microscopy, we're using frequency shift to measure bulk modulus or a longitudinal modulus, where we're using wave speed to measure tensile or shear moduli. Brion microscopy provides a much higher resolution currently than optical coherence elastography. How does optical coherence elastography work? We basically apply a small stress to the tissue, we measure this displacement with OCT imaging, and then we reconstruct the tissue elasticity, and this really depends on the mechanical model being used. There's basically two strategies for OCE. One is compression OCE, the other is wave-based or wave-traveling OCE. And with the wave-based OCT, we can use sound, air puff, acoustic radiation force, or a contact probe. This is work from B.J. Dupe's lab. They were really the first to use compression OCE to measure human keratoconic subjects. And basically you have a flat lens that compresses the cornea and measures the force and axial displacement. And they have generated a spatial biomechanical property ratio to compare these groups, but the ratio cannot be directly measured to elastic moduli, and the spatial resolution is relatively low. This is one big difference for wave-based OCT, because you can actually measure the elastic moduli and can be quantified. And these are different ways, methods to excite the elastic waves in the cornea. There's a contact ultrasound, which is not practical in humans. You can use non-contact ultrasound transducer or a non-contact air puff. but all of these have a relatively low spatial resolution, and enhancing the excitement frequency is the most effective way to improve the resolution. And the Wellman Center Lab has actually developed a contact piezoelectric crystal probe, which has an enhanced excitation frequency that's about 30 kilohertz and 10 times better than anything currently available. And this will allow for regional corneal stiffness measurements with a resolution of about 0.5 millimeters. This is some of the results we have, which are high in vivo resolution stiffness mapping. And you can see just with this, we are picking up differences in corneal stiffness with an area of the peripheral cornea actually being softer than the center, which is very different from what we would expect, as well as some age dependency difference in shear moduli, showing that there's actually a decrease with age. And we're looking at reasons about why this might occur. Likewise, the lab has worked on developing a wavefront-guided OCE technique that excites both the what's called the asymmetric wave and the symmetric wave simultaneously. This is actually a big jump forward because it allows for more accurate data acquisition. The A0 wave actually is used to measure shear moduli, and the S0 wave is used to measure tensile modulus. And we've actually been able to measure this, the tensile and shear moduli for some patients, and actually just this past week, we've began screening keratoconus patients, so hopefully more data to come. So in summary, corneal biomechanics is fundamental to the understanding and diagnosis and treatment of corneal disease. Better tools are needed to assess biomechanics. Brion ocular microscopy can measure viscoelastic properties of the cornea, both non-invasively and tomographically, without corneal deformation, and has many potential applications, including keratoconus diagnosis, evaluating and improving cross-linking treatment, as well as LVC screening and customizing potential corneal incisions. Ultimately, this technology can be combined with other technologies such as tomography and finite element analysis for surgical planning. OCE offers an alternative method to evaluating corneal biomechanics and related structures. The wavefront-based OCE provides high resolution and also quantitative methods for measuring tensile and shear moduli, and is less affected by hydration and IOP compared to Brion microscopy. Much more human data will be on the way. So I'd like to sum up in 3 words everything I've learned about refractive surgery. It goes on. We have more research, more innovations, more technology to bring to our patients and to provide the best outcomes for them. And since my lecture was titled Guided by the Light, I'm going to end with a joke. So where do bad rainbows go? Okay, they go to prism, because it's a light sentence that gives them time to reflect. And I hope I did not keep you in prism too long with this lecture. Thank you very much.